In this tutorial, I will be creating a terrestrial ecosystem using Maya's world mesh node. I used these low poly forest assets I found on ArtStation by Pure Poly. I ended up scaling all the assets down by 0.05 and freezing their transformation so that I didn't have to work with really large numbers in Maya. To start off, you'll want a plane with some variation in height. Personally, I sculpted my ground in ZBrush and brought it into Maya. I made a river, but it's not necessary to have one. Once you have your ground, we need to create the mesh network. Select the trees, go to the mesh drop-down menu, and click Create Mesh Network. Under the Distribute tab, change Distribute Type to Mesh, and middle mouse click drag the ground mesh into the input mesh. As you can see, one of our trees is in the river. To fix that, we will use the Paint Vertex tool. With your ground mesh selected, click on Mesh Display, Paint Vertex Tool option box. This will bring up the tool you need to paint where you want trees to grow or not grow. Go to Mesh Display again and click Modify Current Set. I was then able to paint where I didn't want trees, but I couldn't see what I was painting. Fix this by going to Mesh Display and clicking Color Material Channel None. To paint where you don't want trees, start by changing your color and tool settings to white, and click Flood. Now, change your color to black and paint where the river is, or wherever you don't want trees to spawn. Once you are done, you can go back into Mesh Display, and this time click Toggle Display Colors Attribute to hide what you just painted. Now we are ready to create the rest of the trees. Select your mesh network in the outliner and add a world node to the attribute editor. In the world node settings, you'll want to change the cluster mode from ball to terrestrial ecosystem. Expand to terrestrial ecosystem and you'll need to middle mouse click drag the ground mesh into input mesh again. The terrestrial ecosystem node simulates the trees as if they were growing and being spread across the land in real life. You can slide the ecosystem age slider to see this in action. We can modify where the trees grow by changing settings in the genotype editor. We'll want to change the model size so the trees don't clip into each other. Whenever you change something in the genotype editor, you'll need to press this Update Simulation button. A lot of this feature will be playing with numbers until you have something you like. I changed the seed count here because I felt that there were too few trees. I can enter in a minimum and maximum ID number, and the genotype will use both birch tree meshes. Because of the order I selected them in when I was originally creating the mesh network, the birch trees have the ID numbers of 0 and 1, while the evergreen trees have the ID numbers of 2 and 3. You can change the name to something that makes sense for you. In my case, I'm calling this genotype birch tree, and I can give it a label color to keep track of it. In my assets, I have 2 birch trees and 2 evergreen trees. I can also change the slope threshold, which determines how steep the trees will spawn. The higher the number, the more trees will stick to the flatter areas, and the lower the number, the steeper the trees will spawn. I can create a second genotype for the evergreen trees. I'll change the ID numbers 2 and 3 and click Refresh. I can change all the same numbers that were available for the birch tree. You can also add other meshes afterwards. Say we wanted to add some rocks. Select both rocks in your outliner and control-click on Mesh Instancer. In the attribute editor, you can now click Add Selection. This is also where you can see all of the mesh's ID numbers and even move them around if needed. You can now go back to the Mesh network and add the rock as a genotype. Although adding rocks in this way isn't scientifically accurate, as rocks don't grow like trees. But if you just want a few rocks scattered around, then it seems to work okay. I decided to try the same thing with some grass models. As you can see, the options with this tool are vast and many, and I have only just scratched the surface with this tutorial. There are many settings that I haven't even mentioned that can bring your ecosystem to another level of complexity.